A rancher stood in freezing rain staring at three strangers who just stepped off a stagecoach, a tired woman and two frightened children he'd never met. One decision would either save him or destroy everything he had left. This is a story about a man who thought buying a wife would solve his problems, but what walked through his door that winter changed his life in ways he never imagined. If you stay until the end, you'll see how one desperate promise became the fight of his life. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The wind that day felt like it wanted to kill something. Caleb Mercer stood outside the general store in Coldwater, Wyoming, watching the stagecoach roll down the frozen mud street, and he felt his stomach turn over. His hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. He'd been standing there for 20 minutes, telling himself he could still walk away. Just turn around, go back to the ranch, and forget the whole damn thing. But he didn't move. The stagecoach came to a stop in front of the hotel, and the driver climbed down, his boots hitting the ground with a wet slap. Caleb watched him open the door and offer his hand to someone inside. A woman's hand appeared first, small, pale, wearing a thin glove that had seen better days. Then she stepped down. Evelyn Grayson. She wasn't what he'd expected, though he couldn't have told you what that was. She was maybe 30, maybe older. Dark hair pulled back tight under a worn bonnet. Her dress was clean but faded, patched in places. Her face was thin, exhausted, but there was something in the way she stood, straight-backed, chin up, that made her look like she'd been through hell and refused to apologize for surviving it. Behind her came two children. The boy was maybe 7, small for his age, with sandy hair sticking out from under a cap too big for his head. He clutched a cloth bundle against his chest and stared at the ground like he was trying to disappear into it. The girl was older, 10, maybe 11, and she looked right at Caleb with dark, suspicious eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Caleb's chest tightened. 3 of them. The letter had mentioned children, but seeing them standing there in the cold made it real, in a way words on paper never could. Evelyn spotted him almost immediately. He was the only man standing alone, watching the stagecoach like his life depended on it. She said something to the children, then walked toward him, her boots crunching through the thin layer of ice that covered everything. "Mr. Mercer?" she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Eastern accent. Boston, maybe. Or Philadelphia. "That's me," Caleb said. His own voice sounded strange to him, rough from disuse. He hadn't spoken to another person in 3 weeks. They stood there looking at each other for a long moment. The wind picked up, whipping her skirt around her ankles. She didn't flinch. "I'm Evelyn Grayson," she said. "These are my children, Noah and Clara." Caleb nodded. He tried to say something welcoming, something normal, but his throat felt like it was full of sand. "You got any bags?" he finally managed. "3 trunks," Evelyn said. "The driver has them." Caleb walked past her to the stagecoach and helped the driver unload 3 battered trunks that looked like they'd traveled halfway across the country, which they probably had. He loaded them into the back of his wagon, aware that people were watching from windows and doorways all along the street. Of course they were watching. A man like Caleb Mercer buying himself a wife through a newspaper advertisement? That was the kind of thing people talked about for months. When he finished loading the trunks, he turned and found Evelyn standing beside the wagon with her children. The boy was shivering. The girl's face was red from the cold, but she still had that hard, suspicious look in her eyes. "We should go," Caleb said. "It's a 2-hour ride to the ranch." Evelyn helped the children into the back of the wagon, tucking blankets around them, then climbed up onto the bench beside Caleb. He released the brake and snapped the reins, and the horses started forward. They rode in silence for the first mile. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the gray afternoon. The road, if you could call it that, was frozen mud and dead grass stretching out across flat, empty land that went on forever in every direction. No trees, no hills, just wind and sky and the cold. "How long have you been out here?" Evelyn asked. Caleb glanced at her. She was watching the horizon, her hands folded in her lap. 12 years, he said. "Came out after the war." "Which side?" "North." She nodded but didn't say anything else. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. He wanted to ask her questions, where she was from, what had happened to her husband, why she'd answered his advertisement, but he didn't know how. He'd forgotten how to talk to people, if he'd ever known at all. After another mile, Evelyn spoke again. I need to say something before we get to your ranch. Caleb tensed. All right, I know what this is, she said. I know you're not looking for a love match. You need someone to cook and clean and help with the work. I understand that. I can do those things. But I need you to understand something too. She turned to look at him directly. If you're taking me, you're taking my children, not as workers, not as burdens you're stuck with, as your children. If you can't do that, tell me now, and I'll find another way. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Caleb felt something twist in his chest. He looked back at the kids huddled under blankets in the wagon bed. The boy had his eyes closed, his face pale. The girl was staring at the back of Caleb's head like she was daring him to say the wrong thing. I gave you my word in the letter, Caleb said. I don't go back on my word. Words are easy, Evelyn said. I need to know you mean it. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. The wind howled across the plains, shaking the wagon. I mean it, he said. Evelyn studied his face, then nodded slowly. All right, then. They didn't talk again until the ranch came into view. It wasn't much. A small cabin with a stone chimney, a sagging barn, a corral with 6 horses and maybe 20 head of cattle scattered across the frozen pasture. Everything looked tired and gray, like the land was slowly swallowing it. Caleb pulled the wagon up to the cabin and set the brake. He climbed down and started unloading the trunks while Evelyn helped the children down. The boy stumbled and nearly fell, and Evelyn caught him, murmuring something Caleb couldn't hear. The front door of the cabin was unlocked. Caleb pushed it open and stepped aside. Evelyn walked in first, looking around with an expression Caleb couldn't read. The cabin was one room with a sleeping loft above, a narrow bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a wood stove, a few shelves with canned goods and sacks of flour. That was it. It's not much, Caleb said. It's fine, Evelyn said. But her voice was flat, and Caleb knew she was lying. He brought the trunks inside and set them against the wall. Evelyn was already moving around the room, opening cabinets, checking the stove, running her hand along the dusty table. There's a well out back, Caleb said. Pump's good. The stove draws clean if you keep the flue open. I've got firewood stacked behind the barn. Evelyn nodded, not looking at him. The children stood in the middle of the room like they didn't know where to go. The boy was still clutching his bundle. The girl had her arms crossed, watching everything. You and the kids can have the bed, Caleb said. I'll sleep in the barn. Evelyn turned to look at him. You don't have to do that, she said. It's fine, Caleb said. I've done it before. Not in the middle of winter, you haven't. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how big and awkward he felt in the small room. I'll get a fire going, he said. He busied himself with the stove, feeding and kindling and blowing on the coals until flames caught. The warmth spread slowly through the room. Behind him, he could hear Evelyn unpacking one of the trunks, talking softly to the children. When the fire was going strong, Caleb straightened up and turned around. Evelyn had taken off her bonnet and coat. Her hair was longer than he'd thought, pinned up but coming loose in places. She looked even more tired without the coat, but also younger somehow. I'll go check on the animals, Caleb said. Wait, Evelyn said. He stopped. She walked over to the stove and stood next to him, close enough that he could smell lavender soap, faint but there. Thank you, she said quietly, for the bed, for the fire, for not lying to me about what this place is. Caleb didn't know what to say to that either. It'll get better, he said, though he wasn't sure that was true. Evelyn gave him a small, sad smile. We'll see, she said. That first night was the longest night of Caleb's life. He did sleep in the barn, wrapped in every blanket he owned, listening to the wind tear at the walls and the horses shifting in their stalls. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Evelyn's face when she first walked into the cabin, that careful blankness that meant she was trying not to cry. He'd brought them into this. A woman and 2 children who'd already lost everything once. And for what? Because he was lonely? Because he couldn't stand the sound of his own breathing in the silence anymore? When morning came, gray and cold, Caleb dragged himself out of the barn and walked to the cabin. Smoke was rising from the chimney. That was something, at least. He knocked on his own door, which felt ridiculous, but he didn't know what else to do. Come in, Evelyn's voice called. He stepped inside and stopped. The cabin looked different. The table was clean. The shelves were organized. There was a pot of something on the stove that smelled like coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory and burnt grain he'd been drinking for months. The children were sitting at the table eating something from tin plates. Evelyn was standing by the stove, her hair tied back, wearing a different dress. Still old, still patched, but clean. "I made breakfast," she said. "It's not much, just cornmeal mush and coffee. I didn't know what you had in the way of supplies." "This is fine," Caleb said. This is more than fine." She poured him a cup of coffee and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed, and Caleb pulled back too quickly, sloshing coffee onto the floor. "Sorry," he muttered. "It's all right," Evelyn said. She got him a plate of the cornmeal mush and set it on the table. Caleb sat down across from the children. The boy, Noah, was eating slowly, mechanically, like food was just something you had to do. The girl, Clara, was watching Caleb over the rim of her cup. "Sleep all right?" Caleb asked. It was a stupid question. He knew they probably hadn't slept at all. "Fine," Clara said. Her voice was flat, challenging. "Good," Caleb said. He ate in silence. The mush was bland but filling. The coffee was bitter but hot. It was the best meal he'd had in months. When he finished, he stood up and carried his plate to the basin. "I've got work to do," he said. "Fences to check, cattle to count. You all can do whatever you need to do. Get settled." "I'd like to see the ranch," Evelyn said. "If that's all right, get a sense of what needs doing." Caleb hesitated. "It's cold out." "I'm aware," Evelyn said. "I'd still like to see it." "Me too," Clara said. Caleb looked at Noah, who was staring at his empty plate. "Noah," Evelyn said gently. The boy shook his head without looking up. "He'll stay here," Evelyn said. "He's not feeling well. The travel was hard on him." Caleb nodded. He didn't push it. 10 minutes later, he was walking across the frozen pasture with Evelyn and Clara trailing behind him. The wind was brutal, cutting through his coat like it wasn't there. Evelyn had wrapped a shawl around her head and shoulders, but it wasn't enough. He could see her shivering. "There's 23 head of cattle," Caleb said, raising his voice over the wind. "Used to be 40, but I lost some last winter. Lost more to rustlers. The horses are all work animals except the bay mare. She's a decent saddle horse if you need one." "Rustlers?" Evelyn said. "Sometimes," Caleb said. "Not often. Most people around here have their own problems." He showed her the barn, the corral, the chicken coop that only had 4 chickens left. Everything looked worse in the daylight, more broken down and desperate than it had seemed when he'd been living with it alone. Clara didn't say much, but she was watching everything with those sharp, dark eyes. She walked over to the fence and tested one of the posts, which wobbled under her hand. "This needs fixing," she said. "I know," Caleb said. "This one too," she said, moving to the next post. "And this one." "I know," Caleb said again. She looked at him. "So why haven't you fixed them?" "Clara," Evelyn said sharply. "It's all right," Caleb said. He looked at the girl. "Because I'm one person, and there's more work than one person can do. That's why." Clara didn't look away. "Now there's 3 of us." Something in Caleb's chest tightened. "That's right," he said quietly. "Now there's 3 of us." They walked back to the cabin in silence. When they got inside, Noah was still sitting at the table in the same position they'd left him, staring at nothing. "Noah," Evelyn said, kneeling beside him. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" The boy nodded, but he didn't look at her. Evelyn touched his forehead, then his cheek. "You're cold. Come sit by the fire." She led him to the chair closest to the stove and wrapped a blanket around him. Clara sat down next to him and took his hand. Noah didn't react, didn't even seem to notice. Caleb stood by the door, feeling useless. "He'll be all right," Evelyn said, though she didn't sound sure. "He just needs time." "Yeah," Caleb said. He didn't know what else to say. The days that followed fell into a strange, uncomfortable rhythm. Caleb would wake up before dawn in the barn, feed the horses, check the cattle, then come to the cabin for breakfast. Evelyn always had something ready: cornmeal, beans, sometimes eggs if the chickens had laid. They'd eat in near silence, then Caleb would go back outside to work while Evelyn and Clara stayed inside doing whatever it was they did. Noah rarely left the cabin. The boy was like a ghost, pale and quiet, drifting from the bed to the table to the chair by the fire and back again. He barely ate. He never spoke unless someone asked him a direct question, and even then, his answers were 1 or 2 words at most. Clara was the opposite. She was everywhere, asking questions, testing things, watching Caleb work with an intensity that made him nervous. On the 3rd day, she followed him out to the barn without asking permission. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Mucking stalls," Caleb said. "Can I help?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it's dirty work." "I don't mind dirty work." Caleb stopped and leaned on his shovel. "Your mother know you're out here?" "She's washing clothes. She won't care." Caleb doubted that, but he didn't feel like arguing. "Fine. There's a spare shovel in the corner." Clara grabbed it and started working. She was small, but she was strong, and she didn't complain. They worked in silence for maybe 15 minutes before she spoke again. "How much money do you have?" Caleb looked at her. "What kind of question is that?" "A practical one," Clara said. "I heard you tell Mama that you lost cattle to rustlers and that you're behind on things. I want to know how bad it is." "That's none of your business," Caleb said. "It is if we're supposed to be a family," Clara shot back. "You can't tell us everything's fine if it's not. We're not stupid." Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "I didn't say you were." "Then answer the question." He stared at her for a long moment, then went back to shoveling. "Not enough. I've got maybe 2 months before I have to sell off more cattle to pay what I owe. After that," he shrugged. "After that, I don't know." "What do you owe money for?" "The land. Supplies? Feed? Can you get a loan?" "Not from any bank that'll lend to someone like me." "Someone like you?" "Someone who's already failing." Clara was quiet for a moment. "We're not going to fail." Caleb looked at her. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do," Clara said, "because we didn't come all this way just to starve on a different piece of dirt. We're going to make this work." There was something fierce in her voice, something that reminded Caleb of Evelyn. "All right then," he said. They finished mucking the stalls, and Clara went back to the cabin without another word. That night after supper, Evelyn asked if they could talk. Caleb felt his stomach drop. "All right." They stepped outside, leaving the children by the fire. The night was clear and brutally cold. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. "Clara told me what you said," Evelyn began. "About the money." "She shouldn't have asked," Caleb said. "She's scared," Evelyn said. "We all are. We need to know what we're facing." Caleb shoved his hands into his pockets. "I shouldn't have brought you out here. I thought I could make it work, but I was wrong. You and the kids would be better off somewhere else." "Don't," Evelyn said sharply. He looked at her. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't decide what's better for us. We made a choice to come here. We knew it wasn't going to be easy." "You didn't know it was going to be this bad." "No," Evelyn admitted. "But we're here now, and we're not leaving." "Why not?" Caleb asked. "You don't owe me anything." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her breath misting in the cold air. "Because I've got nowhere else to go," she said quietly. "Because my husband died and left us with nothing but debts and shame. Because people back east looked at me and my children like we were garbage. Because at least out here we have a chance." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Caleb felt something break open in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't need your pity," Evelyn said. "I need your honesty. If we're going to survive this, we need to know what we're up against." Caleb took a breath. "All right. The truth is I owe $800 to the bank in Coldwater. If I can't pay it by spring, they'll take the land. I've been trying to hold on by selling cattle, but I keep losing more than I can afford to lose. And now winter's here, which means the herd's going to get smaller before it gets bigger." "How much can you get for a cow?" $20? Maybe 25 if it's a good one." Evelyn did the math in her head. "So you'd need to sell 32 cattle to clear the debt." "If I sell that many, I won't have enough left to rebuild the herd," Caleb said. "I'll lose the ranch anyway, just slower." "Then we need to find another way to make money," Evelyn said. "There isn't another way out here," Caleb said. "Cattle's all there is." Evelyn looked out at the dark plains. "Then we'll figure something out." "You sound pretty sure about that." "I'm not," Evelyn said. "But I've learned that the only way to survive is to keep moving forward, even when you don't know where you're going." Caleb didn't say anything. He didn't know how. They stood there in the cold for another minute, then Evelyn went back inside. Caleb stayed outside a while longer, looking up at the stars and wondering how the hell he'd gotten himself into this mess, and wondering if there was any way out of it that didn't end with him losing everything. A week after Evelyn and the children arrived, Caleb took them into town. It was a mistake. He knew it the moment they climbed into the wagon, but Evelyn insisted they needed supplies, flour, salt, fabric for new clothes, and he couldn't argue with that. So they went. The ride was tense. Noah sat huddled under blankets, pale and silent. Clara stared out at the passing landscape with that same hard expression. Evelyn sat beside Caleb on the bench, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully blank. When they rolled into cold water, people stopped what they were doing to stare. Caleb felt it like a weight pressing down on him. He pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and set the brake. "I'll get the supplies," he said. "You all can wait here." "No," Evelyn said. "We'll come with you." "Evelyn." "We'll come with you," she repeated. Caleb clenched his jaw but didn't argue. They climbed down from the wagon and walked into the store together. The proprietor, a thin man named Harlan Boone, looked up when they entered. His eyes went from Caleb to Evelyn to the children, and his expression shifted into something between pity and contempt. "Mercer," he said, "heard you brought yourself a family." "I need supplies," Caleb said flatly. 50 pounds of flour, 20 pounds of salt, 10 pounds of coffee, and whatever fabric Mrs. Grayson needs." "Mrs. Grayson now, is it?" Boone said, smirking. Caleb felt his hands curl into fists. "Just get the supplies, Harlan." Boone's smirk faded, but he turned to gather the items. While he worked, Evelyn walked over to the shelves where bolts of fabric were stacked. Clara followed her, running her hand along the cloth. 2 women were standing near the back of the store, whispering to each other and glancing at Evelyn. Caleb recognized them, Sarah Mitchell and Dorothy Vance, both wives of local ranchers. "Shameful," one of them said, not quite loud enough for Evelyn to hear, but loud enough for Caleb to catch. "Selling herself like that." "And those poor children," the other one added, "dragged all the way out here to live with a stranger." Caleb's jaw tightened. He started to say something, but Evelyn caught his eye and shook her head slightly. "Don't," she mouthed. He forced himself to stay quiet. Boone finished gathering the supplies and tallied up the cost. "That'll be $12. Caleb pulled out his money and counted it carefully. He had exactly $13.40 to his name. He handed over the 12 and pocketed the rest. "Put it on credit," he said. Boone raised an eyebrow. "You're already carrying a balance, Mercer." "I know. I'll settle it when I sell cattle in the spring." Boone hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But you're running out of rope here." "I'm aware," Caleb said. They loaded the supplies into the wagon and climbed back in. As they were pulling away, a group of boys, maybe 12 or 13 years old, came running down the street. One of them pointed at Noah and Clara. "Hey, you the mail order kids." Clara's face went hard. Noah shrank back against his mother. "Keep moving," Caleb said, snapping the reins. "Bet your new pa don't even want you," one of the boys shouted. "Bet he's gonna send you back." Clara stood up in the wagon, and Evelyn grabbed her arm. "Sit down." "They can't talk to us like that," Clara said. "Sit down," Evelyn repeated, her voice sharp. Clara sat, but her hands were trembling with rage. They rode out of town in silence. Caleb could feel the tension radiating off all 3 of them. When they were far enough away that the town had disappeared behind them, Evelyn finally spoke. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" Caleb asked. "For bringing you into this, for making people talk." "They were already talking," Caleb said. "That's what people do out here. Talk. It's all they've got. It's not fair to the children." "No," Caleb agreed. "It's not." He glanced back at Noah and Clara. The boy was crying silently, tears running down his pale cheeks. The girl had her arm around him, whispering something Caleb couldn't hear. Something hot and sharp twisted in his chest. He'd done this. He'd brought them into a place where people looked at them like they were something shameful, something broken. And for what? Because he couldn't stand being alone? That night, after supper, Caleb went out to the barn and didn't come back. He sat in the hayloft with a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving and drank until the cold didn't bother him anymore. until he couldn't feel the weight of his own failure pressing down on his chest. He woke up the next morning to someone shaking his shoulder. It was Clara. "You need to come inside," she said. Caleb's head was pounding. His mouth tasted like ash. "Why?" "Because Noah's sick." That cut through the fog. Caleb sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. "Sick how?" "He's burning up. Mama's trying to cool him down, but she needs help." Caleb stumbled down from the loft and followed Clara to the cabin. When he walked inside, he found Evelyn sitting beside the bed, pressing a wet cloth to Noah's forehead. The boy's face was flushed red, his breathing shallow and fast. "How long's he been like this?" Caleb asked. "Since last night," Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "I thought it was just a fever, but it's getting worse." Caleb touched Noah's forehead. The kid was burning up. "We need to get him to a doctor," Caleb said. "The nearest doctor is in Coldwater," Evelyn said. "That's 2 hours each way." "Then we go now." "He can't make that trip. The cold will kill him." Caleb felt panic rising in his chest. "Then what do we do?" Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw fear in her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. Caleb rode into Coldwater like the devil was chasing him, pushing his horse harder than he should have in the cold. The wind tore at his face and his hands were numb on the reins, but he didn't slow down. Noah's fever had climbed so high that the boy had started shaking, his teeth chattering even though his skin felt like it was on fire. The doctor's office was above the barber shop, a narrow staircase leading up from the street. Caleb took the steps 2 at a time and pounded on the door. "Doc Harrison, open up!" Nothing. Caleb pounded again, harder this time, and finally heard footsteps inside. The door opened to reveal a gray-haired man in his 60s, spectacles perched on his nose, irritation written across his face. "What in blazes? Mercer? What are you doing here at this hour?" "I need you to come to my ranch," Caleb said. "The boy's sick, high fever, he's shaking. My wife doesn't know what to do." Harrison's expression shifted from irritation to professional concern. "How high is the fever?" "High enough that he's out of his head, saying things that don't make sense." "How long has he been like this?" "Since yesterday? Maybe longer. I don't know." Harrison stepped back into his office and started gathering supplies into his medical bag. "Could be pneumonia, could be influenza. Won't know until I see him." "How soon can you come?" "Give me 10 minutes to get my horse." "I'll pay you," Caleb said. "Whatever it costs." Harrison looked at him over his spectacles. "I know you will. Now get out of my way so I can work." The ride back to the ranch felt twice as long as the ride into town. Harrison followed on his own horse, his medical bag strapped behind his saddle. They didn't talk. There was nothing to say. When they reached the cabin, Evelyn met them at the door. Her face was drawn, exhausted, but she stepped aside to let Harrison through. "Where is he?" Harrison asked. "In the bed," Evelyn said. Harrison went straight to Noah and pressed his hand against the boy's forehead, then pulled back the blanket and listened to his chest with a stethoscope. The room was silent, except for Noah's ragged breathing. After what felt like an eternity, Harrison straightened up. "It's pneumonia," he said. "Early stages, but it'll get worse if we don't treat it." "What do we need to do?" Evelyn asked. "Keep him warm. Get fluids into him. Water, broth, anything he'll take. I'll leave you some willow bark for the fever." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small packet. "Steep this in hot water and make him drink it every 4 hours. It'll taste terrible, but it'll bring the fever down." "Will he be all right?" Clara asked from the corner. Harrison looked at her, then at Evelyn. "If we're lucky and the fever breaks in the next day or 2, yes. If it doesn't—" He trailed off. "If it doesn't, what?" Caleb demanded. "Then we'll have bigger problems," Harrison said bluntly. "Pneumonia doesn't always play fair, especially with children who've already been weakened by travel and cold." Evelyn's face went pale, but she nodded. "What else can we do?" "Pray," Harrison said, "and keep doing what you're doing." He packed up his bag and stood. Caleb followed him to the door. "How much do I owe you?" Caleb asked. $5 for the visit, 2 for the medicine." Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out the last of his money. He counted it carefully. $6.40. He handed over $7. "Keep the change," he said. Harrison pocketed the money and gave Caleb a long look. "You've got yourself a difficult situation here, Mercer. I'm aware. That woman in there. She's scared. The children are scared. They're counting on you. I know that too. Harrison put his hand on Caleb's shoulder. Then don't let them down. He left, and Caleb stood in the doorway watching him ride away into the darkness. When he turned back, Evelyn was standing by the stove, boiling water for the willow bark tea. We're out of money, Caleb said quietly. Evelyn didn't look up. I figured. I've got nothing left to sell except the cattle, and if I sell them now, we won't make it through winter. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. Evelyn finally looked at him. Then we'll make one. Over the next 3 days, Noah hovered between life and death. The fever wouldn't break. No matter how much willow bark tea they forced down his throat, no matter how many cold compresses Evelyn pressed to his forehead, the boy burned. He thrashed in the bed, calling out for his father, crying for his mother, saying things that made no sense. Evelyn barely slept. She sat beside the bed day and night, changing the compresses, making him drink, whispering to him in a voice so soft Caleb could barely hear it. Clara helped where she could, fetching water, keeping the fire going, but mostly she just watched her brother with dark, frightened eyes. Caleb felt useless. He did the ranch work because it needed doing, but his mind was always in the cabin, wondering if the boy was still breathing, if the fever had finally broken, if they were going to lose him. On the third night, something changed. Caleb came in from the barn around midnight and found Evelyn still sitting beside the bed, her head bowed, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. Any change? He asked. She shook her head. Caleb walked over and looked down at Noah. The boy's face was flushed red, his breathing shallow and fast. Too fast. He's getting worse, Caleb said. I know. Maybe we should take him back to town. Maybe Harrison can... He can't do anything we're not already doing, Evelyn interrupted. Her voice was flat, exhausted. Moving him now would kill him faster than the fever. Caleb felt something break inside him. Then what do we do? Evelyn didn't answer. She just sat there, staring at her son, and Caleb realized she didn't have an answer. For the first time since she'd arrived, she was out of ideas, out of strength, out of hope. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. When I was in the war, he said quietly, I saw a lot of men die. Good men, strong men, men who should have made it home, and I saw men who shouldn't have survived, men who were shot to pieces, men who should have bled out in the mud, walk away like nothing happened. Evelyn looked at him. I never understood it, Caleb continued. Why some lived and some died, it didn't make sense, still doesn't, but I learned something. The ones who made it weren't always the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones who had something to fight for, something that kept them going when everything else said to quit. Noah's just a child, Evelyn said. What does he have to fight for? You, Caleb said, and Clara, and maybe even me if I haven't already let him down too much. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away. They sat there in silence for a long time, listening to Noah's ragged breathing, waiting for something to change. And then, just before dawn, it did. Caleb woke with a start, not realizing he'd fallen asleep. Evelyn was leaning over Noah, her hand on his forehead, and when she straightened up, there were tears running down her face. The fever broke, she whispered. Caleb stood up so fast his chair fell over. He touched Noah's forehead himself. The boy was still warm, but not burning. His breathing had slowed, deepened. He looked like he was actually sleeping instead of fighting. He's going to be all right, Evelyn said, and then she was crying for real, her whole body shaking with relief. Caleb didn't know what to do. He stood there awkwardly for a moment, then put his hand on her shoulder. She leaned into him, just for a second, and he felt the weight of what they'd just been through crash down on both of them. Clara appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. What's happening? Your brother's going to be all right, Evelyn said, pulling away from Caleb and wiping her face. Clara ran to the bed and took Noah's hand. The boy didn't wake up, but his fingers twitched slightly, and Clara smiled for the first time in days. I told you we weren't going to fail, she said, looking at Caleb. Yeah, Caleb said, you did. Noah recovered slowly. It took another week before he could sit up without getting dizzy, another week after that before he could walk around the cabin without Evelyn hovering over him. But gradually, color returned to his face, and his eyes started to focus on things again. The first time he spoke, really spoke, not just mumbling in fever dreams, was to ask Caleb about the horses. They were sitting at the table eating breakfast, and Noah was pushing beans around his plate like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "The bay mare," he said quietly. "What's her name?" Caleb looked up, surprised. "She doesn't have one. Never bothered naming her." "Can I name her?" Noah asked. Evelyn and Clara both stopped eating and looked at the boy. "Sure," Caleb said. "What do you want to call her?" Noah thought about it for a moment. "Willow?" "Why Willow?" Clara asked. "Because of the tea," Noah said. "The willow bark tea that made me better." Something caught in Caleb's throat, and he had to clear it before he could speak. "Willow's a good name." After that, something shifted in the cabin. It was subtle at first. Noah started following Caleb around, asking questions about everything. How to saddle a horse, how to mend a fence, why the cattle stayed together in groups, whether the chickens would lay more eggs if you talked to them. The kid was like a dam that had finally broken, words spilling out of him in a constant stream. Clara kept working alongside Caleb without asking permission. She learned how to milk the cow they'd acquired from a neighbor in exchange for labor, how to patch the barn roof, how to tell when a fence post was rotten and needed replacing. She was stubborn and opinionated and didn't take no for an answer, which drove Caleb crazy half the time, but also made him respect her. And Evelyn turned the cabin into something that felt less like a place Caleb slept and more like a place he lived. She sewed curtains from old fabric scraps. She organized the shelves so Caleb could actually find things. She cooked meals that tasted like actual food instead of just fuel. Small things, but they added up. One night, about 3 weeks after Noah's fever broke, Caleb came in from the barn to find the table set with plates and cups and a pot of stew that smelled so good his stomach growled. "What's the occasion?" he asked. "No occasion," Evelyn said. "Just thought we could use a proper meal." They sat down together, all four of them, and ate. Caleb couldn't remember the last time he'd shared a meal with other people. He'd forgotten what it felt like to hear voices, to have someone ask him to pass the salt, to listen to Clara and Noah bicker about something that didn't matter. It felt normal, and normal felt dangerous. Because normal meant he was getting used to this. Normal meant he was starting to need them. And that terrified him more than the debt, more than the failing ranch, more than anything. But then winter hit hard, and he didn't have time to think about what terrified him. The first real storm came in late January, a blizzard that lasted 3 days and buried the ranch under 4 feet of snow. Caleb spent those 3 days in the barn with the animals, making sure they didn't freeze, while Evelyn and the children stayed in the cabin keeping the fire going. When the storm finally broke, Caleb dug his way out of the barn and found 2 cattle dead, frozen where they'd been standing. He dragged their carcasses away from the herd and tried not to think about what they'd been worth. The second storm came a week later, and this time they lost 4 more cattle. By February, the herd was down to 14 head. Caleb did the math in his head and felt his chest tighten. Even if he sold every single cow, he wouldn't have enough to pay off the debt. He was going to lose the ranch. It was just a matter of time. He didn't tell Evelyn. He didn't tell anyone. He just kept working, kept moving forward, because that was all he knew how to do. But Evelyn noticed. She always noticed. One night, after the children were asleep, she found him sitting outside on the step, staring out at the frozen plains. "You're going to freeze out here," she said. "I'm fine." She sat down next to him anyway, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. They sat in silence for a while, their breath misting in the cold air. "We're going to lose it, aren't we?" Evelyn said quietly. Caleb didn't see any point in lying. "Yeah, probably." "When?" "Spring, maybe sooner if the bank decides to come calling." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "What will you do?" "I don't know," Caleb admitted. "Find work somewhere. Maybe hire on at another ranch, save up and try again somewhere else." "And us?" The question hung in the air between them. "I'll make sure you and the kids are taken care of," Caleb said. "I'll find you a place in town, or maybe passage back east if that's what you want. You won't be left with nothing." "That's not what I asked," Evelyn said. Caleb looked at her. In the moonlight, her face was pale and tired, but there was steel in her eyes. "What did you ask then?" he said. "I asked about us. The 4 of us. What happens to us?" "I don't know what you want me to say, Evelyn." "I want you to say that we're not just people you're responsible for," Evelyn said, her voice rising slightly. I want you to say that we matter to you, that Noah matters, that Clara matters, that I matter. Of course you matter, Caleb said. All of you matter. That's the whole damn problem. How is that a problem? Because I can't protect you. Caleb stood up, his frustration boiling over. I can't keep the ranch. I can't pay the debt. I can't even keep the cattle alive through winter. I brought you here thinking I could give you something better, and all I've done is drag you into my failure. You didn't drag us anywhere, Evelyn said, standing to face him. We chose to come here. We chose to stay. And we're choosing to stay now, even knowing what we're up against. That's insane. Maybe it is, Evelyn said, but we've been through worse. My children almost died from hunger back east. I almost lost Noah to pneumonia. We've survived things that should have killed us, and we're still here. So don't you dare give up on us now. Caleb stared at her, feeling something crack open in his chest. I don't know how to not fail you, he said quietly. Then we'll fail together, Evelyn said. But we're not running, not anymore. She went back inside, leaving Caleb standing in the cold. He stayed out there for a long time, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so complicated, how he'd gone from being a man who didn't need anyone to being a man who couldn't imagine losing the people he'd let into his life. The next morning, everything changed again. Caleb was in the barn feeding the horses when he heard riders approaching. He walked outside and saw 3 men on horseback coming up the road. He recognized the one in front immediately. Wade Hollister. Wade was a rancher who owned a spread about 10 miles west of Caleb's place. He was older, maybe 50, with a hard face and eyes that looked like they'd never smiled in their life. He'd tried to buy Caleb's land twice before, offering half what it was worth, and both times Caleb had told him to go to hell. Apparently Wade hadn't taken the hint. The 3 men pulled up in front of the cabin, and Wade dismounted. The other 2 stayed on their horses, their faces blank. Mercer, Wade said, heard you've been having some trouble. Nothing I can't handle, Caleb said. That's not what I heard. Heard you lost half your herd to winter. Heard you're behind on your debts. Heard the bank's getting ready to foreclose. Who told you that? People talk, Wade said, shrugging. Small town. Word gets around. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. What do you want, Wade? I want to help you out, Wade said. I'm prepared to make you an offer for this place. Fair market value. Enough to pay off what you owe and have a little left over to get you started somewhere else. I'm not selling. Don't be stupid, Mercer. You're going to lose this place anyway. At least this way, you walk away with something. I said I'm not selling. Wade's expression darkened. You've got a family now, a wife, children. You really want to put them through watching you lose everything? My family's none of your business. It is when you're too stubborn to see what's best for them. Caleb took a step forward. Get off my land. Wade held his ground. I'm trying to be reasonable here. No, you're trying to take advantage of me. Now get off my land before I make you. The 2 men on horses shifted slightly, their hands moving toward their belts. Caleb saw it and felt his whole body tense. Then the cabin door opened and Evelyn stepped out. She was holding Caleb's rifle. She didn't point it at anyone. She just stood there on the step, the rifle cradled in her arms, looking at Wade with calm, steady eyes. I believe my husband asked you to leave, she said. Wade looked at her, then at the rifle, then back at Caleb. You're making a mistake, he said. Won't be the first time, Caleb said. Wade mounted his horse and looked down at Caleb. When you lose this place, and you will, don't come crawling to me for help. Wasn't planning on it. Wade rode off, his men following. Caleb watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to Evelyn. She lowered the rifle and leaned it against the cabin wall. You all right? She asked. Yeah, thanks for the backup. Any time. She went back inside, and Caleb stood there for a moment, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite hope, but close enough. Wade Hollister came back 3 days later, but this time he didn't bother with pleasantries. Caleb was out checking the fence line when he heard cattle bawling in distress. He ran back toward the pasture and found 2 of his cows lying on their sides, their throats cut, blood staining the snow dark red. The rest of the herd had scattered, panicked and wild-eyed. His hands shook as he knelt beside the dead animals. These weren't just cattle. They were money he didn't have, food his family needed, the last desperate chance at saving the ranch. Clara found him there 10 minutes later. What happened? She asked. then saw the blood and went pale. "Go back to the cabin," Caleb said. "Don't tell your mother yet. I need to think." "Someone did this on purpose," Clara said. She wasn't asking. "Yeah. Was it that man, the one who came here?" Caleb didn't answer, but Clara read it in his face. "We should go to the sheriff," she said. "Sheriff's in Wade's pocket," Caleb said bitterly. "Has been for years. He won't do anything." "Then what are we going to do?" Caleb looked at the dead cattle, then at Clara's fierce, angry face. "I don't know yet." But he knew one thing. This wasn't going to stop. Wade wanted the land, and he was willing to destroy Caleb piece by piece to get it. That night after the children were asleep, Caleb told Evelyn what had happened. She listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with every word. "He's trying to break you," she said when he finished. "He's succeeding." "No, he's not." Evelyn stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark plains. "He thinks you're alone. He thinks you'll fold because you've got no one to help you." "I am alone," Caleb said. "The town thinks I'm a joke. The bank wants me gone. And Wade's got enough money and men to do whatever he wants." Evelyn turned to face him. "You're not alone. You've got me. You've got Clara and Noah. That's 4 people who aren't going to let that bastard take what's ours." "Evelyn, don't," she said sharply. "Don't tell me it's too dangerous. Don't tell me we should run. We've run before and it didn't save us. It just made us weaker." Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know what to say to that. "We stay," Evelyn said. "We fight, and we don't give Wade Hollister 1 inch of this land." Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. Caleb woke up one morning to find the water pump broken, the handle snapped clean off. He spent half a day fixing it, only to discover the next morning that someone had poisoned the well. They had to haul water from the creek a mile away, breaking ice to get to it, carrying buckets back and forth until Caleb's shoulders felt like they were going to tear apart. Then the barn caught fire. It was the middle of the night, and Caleb woke to the smell of smoke. He ran outside in his bare feet and saw flames licking up the side of the barn, orange and hungry against the black sky. "Fire!" he shouted. "Everyone up, now!" Evelyn and the children stumbled out of the cabin, disoriented and terrified. Caleb was already running toward the barn, his mind racing. The horses were inside. If the barn went up completely, they'd lose everything. "Get buckets!" he yelled. "Fill them from the creek." Clara grabbed 2 buckets and ran. Noah followed her, stumbling in the snow. Evelyn ran to help Caleb with the barn doors. They got the doors open and smoke poured out, thick and choking. Caleb could hear the horses screaming inside, panicked and trapped. He pulled his shirt over his mouth and ran in. The heat hit him like a wall. The flames had spread to the hay in the loft, and burning pieces were falling like rain. Caleb found the first horse, the bay mare, Willow, and grabbed her halter, dragging her toward the door. She fought him, rearing and kicking, but he held on and finally got her outside. He ran back in for the others. The smoke was worse now, burning his lungs, making his eyes water. He found 2 more horses and got them out, then went back for the last one. But the fire had spread to the support beams, and one of them cracked with a sound like a gunshot. "Caleb, get out!" Evelyn screamed from outside. "The barn's coming down!" He ignored her and kept going. The last horse was in the back corner, wild with fear. Caleb grabbed its halter and pulled, but the animal wouldn't move. "Come on, you stubborn son of a—" Another beam cracked, and part of the roof collapsed behind him, showering him with burning debris. Pain exploded across his back and shoulder, but he didn't let go of the halter. He dragged the horse toward the door, half blind from smoke, his back screaming. They burst out into the cold air just as another section of roof collapsed. Caleb fell to his knees, coughing so hard he thought his lungs would tear. Evelyn was there, pulling him away from the barn, her hands on his face. "Are you all right? Caleb, look at me. Are you all right?" He nodded, still coughing. Behind them, the barn groaned and then collapsed completely, sending sparks spiraling up into the night sky. They stood there watching it burn, the 4 of them covered in soot and ash, while the horses milled around nervously in the snow. "You're back," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "You're bleeding." Caleb reached back and felt wetness. His shirt was burned through, and the skin underneath felt raw and torn. "It's fine," he said. "It's not fine. Get inside. Now." She half dragged him to the cabin and made him sit down while she peeled off what was left of his shirt. Clara and Noah stood by the door, their faces pale. How bad is it? Caleb asked. Bad enough, Evelyn said. She got a cloth and started cleaning the burns. Caleb gritted his teeth against the pain. Someone set that fire, Clara said from the doorway. I know, Caleb said. Was it him again? Probably. We should kill him, Clara said, her voice flat and cold. Clara, Evelyn said sharply, don't say things like that. Why not? He's trying to kill us. Why shouldn't we kill him first? Because we're not murderers, Evelyn said. No matter what he does, we're not becoming that. Clara's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She just turned and walked outside, slamming the door behind her. Noah stood there, looking lost. Is the barn really gone? Yeah, Caleb said. It's gone. Where will the horses sleep? We'll figure something out. But Caleb didn't know how. The barn had been the only shelter for the animals. Without it, they'd be exposed to the elements, and more would die. And he had no money to rebuild, no materials, no time. They were losing. Slowly, piece by piece, Wade was destroying them. The next morning, Caleb rode into town despite Evelyn's protests about his burned back. He went straight to the sheriff's office and walked in without knocking. Sheriff Tom Bridger looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. Mercer, what can I do for you? You can arrest Wade Hollister, Caleb said. Bridger leaned back in his chair. On what charge? Arson, vandalism, destruction of property, take your pick. You got proof it was Wade? Who else would it be? That's not proof, Mercer. That's speculation. He's been harassing me for weeks. He threatened me. And now my barn's burned to the ground and my cattle are dead. You know it was him. Bridger shrugged. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Point is, I can't arrest a man based on your feelings. Caleb felt rage building in his chest. He's trying to drive me off my land. Then maybe you should sell, Bridger said. Save everyone a lot of trouble. You're in his pocket, aren't you? That's why you won't do anything. Bridger's face hardened. Watch yourself, Mercer. Or what? You'll arrest me for telling the truth? I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace if you don't get out of my office right now. Caleb stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked out. There was no point arguing with a man who'd already been bought. He rode back to the ranch feeling like he'd swallowed broken glass. When he got there, he found Clara and Noah working on building a makeshift shelter for the horses out of salvaged wood and canvas. Evelyn was helping them, her sleeves rolled up, her face smudged with dirt. Sheriff won't help, Caleb said, dismounting. Figured as much, Evelyn said. So we help ourselves. With what? We've got no barn, no money, and half our cattle are dead or scattered. What exactly are we supposed to do? We keep going, Evelyn said. That's what we do. We keep going until Wade gives up or until we die trying. Those are the only two options. Caleb wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. So they kept going. They built the shelter, crude and ugly but functional. They rounded up the scattered cattle and moved them closer to the cabin where they could keep watch. They took turns staying up at night, watching for fires or intruders, sleeping in shifts. It was exhausting. It was hopeless. But they didn't quit. Then one night, Wade made his biggest mistake. Caleb was on watch, sitting on the cabin step with the rifle across his knees when he heard riders approaching. 3 of them, moving slow and quiet through the darkness. He stood up and raised the rifle. That's far enough, he called out. The riders stopped. One of them moved forward and moonlight caught his face. Wade Hollister. You're a stubborn man, Mercer, Wade said. And you're trespassing. Get off my land. This isn't your land anymore. The bank foreclosed on you this morning. I bought the note. This place is mine now. Caleb felt the ground shift under his feet. You're lying. Am I? Go ask Boone at the general store. He was there when the papers were signed. You've got until the end of the week to clear out. Like hell I do, Wade shrugged. You can leave peacefully, or my men can help you leave. Your choice. Behind Caleb, the cabin door opened. Evelyn stepped out, followed by Clara and Noah. Evelyn was holding the rifle again. You're not taking this place, she said. Wade looked at her and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You really want to fight me, woman? You and these children against me and my men? If that's what it takes, Evelyn said, then you're stupider than I thought. Maybe, Evelyn said, but we're not cowards, and we're not leaving. Wade's smile faded. You've got 3 days. After that, I'm coming back with enough men to burn this place to the ground with you in it, if that's what it takes." He turned his horse and rode off into the darkness, his men following. When they were gone, Caleb turned to Evelyn. Her hands were shaking on the rifle, but her face was set hard. "He's going to kill us," Caleb said quietly. "I know." "You should take the children and go. Get out before he comes back." "No." "Evelyn."
"No," she repeated. "We're not running. Not from him. Not from anyone." "Then we're going to die here." "Maybe," Evelyn said, "but at least we'll die fighting for something that matters." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He just stood there, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. The debt, the dead cattle, the burned barn, the wife and children who'd put their trust in a man who couldn't protect them. Clara spoke up from behind them. "We need help." Caleb turned to look at her. "There is no help. Wade owns this town." "Then we go to the people who don't live in town," Clara said. "The other ranchers, the farmers, the people who've been pushed around by Wade just like us." "They won't help," Caleb said. "They've got their own problems." "Maybe," Clara said, "but maybe some of them are tired of Wade pushing everyone around. Maybe some of them would help if someone just asked." Caleb looked at Evelyn, then back at Clara. "It's worth a try," Evelyn said. So the next morning, Caleb saddled Willow and rode out. He spent 2 days riding from ranch to ranch, farm to farm, talking to anyone who would listen. Most people turned him away. They were scared of Wade, or they didn't care, or they figured Caleb had brought his troubles on himself. But a few listened. Tom Rawlings, a farmer whose land bordered Wade's, had lost 3 cows to suspicious circumstances the year before. Martha Chen, who ran a small ranch with her 2 sons, had been forced to sell Wade half her land for pennies on the dollar when her husband died. John and Sarah Kowalski, newly arrived from Poland, had been cheated by Wade's men at the cattle market. None of them had enough power to stand up to Wade alone. But together? Maybe. "He's coming for me in 3 days, Caleb told them. "He says he's going to burn me out. I can't stop him by myself. But if we stand together, if we show him that he can't just take whatever he wants, maybe we can change things." "And if we can't?" Tom Rawlings asked. "What then?" "Then we lose," Caleb said honestly. "But at least we lose fighting instead of rolling over." There was a long silence. Then Martha Chen spoke up. "I'm in." One by one, the others agreed. By the time Caleb rode back to his ranch on the second night, he had 12 families who'd promised to stand with him. It wasn't much. Wade had more men, more money, more everything, but it was something. When Caleb told Evelyn what he'd done, she just nodded. "Good," she said. "Now we wait." The next day passed slowly. Caleb and the others prepared as best they could, gathering what weapons they had, positioning themselves around the ranch, making sure the children knew where to hide if things went bad. Noah stayed close to Evelyn, his face pale. Clara checked and rechecked the rifle, her jaw set tight. When the sun started to set on the 3rd day, Caleb saw riders on the horizon. A lot of riders. Wade was coming, and he'd brought an army. Caleb counted at least 20 men, all armed, moving toward the ranch in a steady line. His stomach turned over. "Get inside," he told Evelyn. "No." "Evelyn, please." "I said no." She stood beside him, the rifle in her hands. Clara was on his other side. Even Noah had picked up a length of wood, holding it like a club. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the cabin. Wade rode forward alone. "Last chance, Mercer," he called out. "You and yours can walk away right now. Otherwise, we're taking this place, and I don't care who gets hurt." Caleb opened his mouth to answer, but before he could, something happened. More riders appeared from the west, then from the north. Tom Rawlings, Martha Chen, the Kowalskis. All 12 families Caleb had talked to, plus a few more he hadn't expected. They rode in slow and steady, forming a line between Wade's men and the ranch. Wade's face went red. "What the hell is this?" "This is us," Tom Rawlings said. "And we're saying you've pushed enough people around, Wade. It stops here." "You don't know what you're doing," Wade said. "I'll destroy all of you." "Maybe," Martha Chen said, "but there's more of us than there are of you, and we're done being scared." Wade looked around at the faces staring back at him. His men were shifting nervously in their saddles, clearly not expecting this. "You're making a mistake," Wade said. "Probably," Caleb said, "but it's ours to make."
For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Wade spat on the ground and jerked his horse around. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah, it is," Caleb said. Wade rode off, his men following. They didn't look back. When they were gone, Caleb turned to the people who'd come to help him. His throat felt tight, and he didn't trust his voice. "Thank you," he finally managed. "Don't thank us yet," Tom Rawlings said. "Wade's not the kind to give up easy. This might have just made him angrier." "Then we deal with that when it comes," Caleb said. One by one, the families rode off, heading back to their own homes. Caleb watched them go, feeling something shift inside him. He'd spent 12 years alone on this ranch, telling himself he didn't need anyone, that depending on people only led to disappointment. But tonight, people had showed up. People had stood beside him, and that changed everything. When the last rider disappeared over the ridge, Evelyn put her hand on his arm. "Come inside," she said. "You need to rest." "In a minute," Caleb said. He stood there in the cold darkness, looking out at the land he'd almost lost, the cabin that had become a home, the family he'd never expected to have. And for the first time in years, he felt something that might have been hope, but hope didn't pay debts. 3 days after Wade rode off, a man Caleb had never seen before showed up at the ranch. He wore a suit that looked expensive and out of place against the frozen Wyoming landscape, and he carried a leather satchel under one arm. "Mr. Mercer?" the man said, dismounting from a rented horse that clearly didn't like him. "That's me," Caleb said. He was out front repairing fence posts with Clara, both of them covered in mud and sweat despite the cold. "My name is Howard Finch. I represent First Bank of Coldwater. I'm here regarding your outstanding debt." Caleb's stomach dropped. "I know I'm behind. I'm working on it." Finch opened his satchel and pulled out a stack of papers. "According to our records, you owe $817. The note came due 4 days ago. We've been more than patient, Mr. Mercer, but the bank cannot extend your credit any further." "I just need until spring," Caleb said. "Once the calving season starts, I can sell enough cattle to—" "The bank's position is that you don't have enough cattle left to cover the debt, even with successful calving," Finch interrupted. "We've assessed the situation, and frankly, the numbers don't support further yanchi." Clara stepped forward. "What's he saying?" "He's saying the bank wants their money now," Caleb said quietly. "We have 30 days, Evelyn said from the cabin doorway. She must have heard the conversation and come outside. "The original agreement gave us until the end of March." Finch looked at her with thinly veiled disdain. "The agreement was made with Mr. Mercer as a single landowner. His circumstances have changed significantly since then. New dependents, additional expenses, reduced herd size. The bank has every right to call in the note early under such circumstances." "That's not legal," Evelyn said. "I assure you, madam, it is quite legal. Perhaps if you'd spent less time playing house and more time understanding the financial realities, you wouldn't be in this position." Caleb took a step toward Finch, his hands curling into fists. "Watch your mouth." Finch took a step back but held his ground. "Violence won't change the facts, Mr. Mercer. You have 2 weeks to pay the full amount, or the bank will foreclose. Those are the terms." "2 weeks? You just said the note came due 4 days ago." "I'm being generous," Finch said. "Mr. Hollister suggested we foreclose immediately, but I convinced the bank president to give you a final opportunity." So Wade was behind this too. Of course he was. "What if we can't pay in 2 weeks?" Evelyn asked. "Then the property becomes bank property, to be sold at auction. Mr. Hollister has already expressed interest in purchasing it." Finch climbed back onto his horse, clearly eager to leave. "I'll return in 14 days for payment. Good day." He rode off, leaving Caleb standing there feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. Claire's voice was small when she spoke. "Are we going to lose the ranch?" Caleb looked at Evelyn. Her face was pale but set. "Not if I can help it," he said, though he had no idea how. That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb and Evelyn sat at the table counting money. They had $43 in cash. Caleb had 3 horses he could sell, maybe 4 if he gave up Willow. That might bring another $60 if he was lucky. They had some tools, furniture, kitchen supplies, none of it worth much, but together maybe another $20 or $30. No matter how they added it up, they came up hundreds short. "We could sell the cattle now," Evelyn said. "All of them. We'd get maybe $200 for the whole herd in winter," Caleb said. Nobody's buying cattle right now, and even if they were, 200 doesn't come close to 800. What about taking out another loan from a different bank? No bank's going to lend to someone who's about to lose everything to another bank. And even if they would, I'd just be trading one debt for another. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, staring at the pitiful pile of money on the table.
There has to be something we're not thinking of, she said. There isn't, Caleb said. I've been over it 100 times. We don't have enough, and there's no way to get enough in 2 weeks. So that's it? We just give up? I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic.
Evelyn stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Realistic. That's what my husband used to say when he gambled away our savings.
Be realistic, Evelyn. We're never going to have enough. Might as well enjoy what we've got. And you know where that got us? Penniless and ashamed, with creditors pounding on the door and neighbors whispering behind our backs.
I'm not your husband, Caleb said. No, you're not. He gave up. You haven't. Not yet. Evelyn's voice softened.
But I can see it in your eyes. You're starting to. What do you want me to do, Evelyn? I can't magic money out of thin air. I want you to fight, she said, the way you fought to save Noah, the way you fought Wade when he came here with his men. I want you to fight like this place matters to you. It does matter to me. Then prove it.
She went to the bedroom area and pulled the curtain closed, ending the conversation. Caleb sat there alone, staring at the money on the table, feeling like the world's biggest failure. The next morning, he rode into town before dawn. If he was going to lose the ranch, he was at least going to understand exactly how it happened. He found Harlan Boone opening up the general store and cornered him before anyone else was around. I need information, Caleb said.
Boone looked nervous.
About what?
About Wade Hollister and the bank. How much is he paying them to push me out? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Harlan. You were there when the papers were signed. Finch said so. What's Wade promised them? Boone glanced around like he was worried someone might hear. Look, Mercer, I like you, but Wade's got reach I don't want to mess with. I'm not asking you to mess with anything. I just want to know what I'm up against. Boone was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. Wade didn't just buy your note. He bought notes on half the ranches in the county. He's been doing it for 2 years, working with the bank to squeeze people out when they can't pay. He gets the land cheap at auction, and the bank gets a cut of the profits when he resells. Caleb felt sick. How many people has he done this to? At least a dozen that I know of, maybe more. And nobody stopped him?
How? He's got money, lawyers, the sheriff. What are people like us supposed to do? You could have warned me. Would it have changed anything? Boone asked. You were already drowning before Wade got involved. He just decided to push your head under. Caleb wanted to hit him, but Boone was right. The debt had been there before Wade, before Evelyn, before everything. Caleb had been failing on his own. Wade had just accelerated it. He left the store and rode back toward the ranch, his mind churning. Halfway home, he passed Tom Rawlings' farm. On impulse, he turned down the road and found Tom in his barn, mucking stalls. Mercer, Tom said, looking surprised. What brings you here? I need advice, Caleb said. You've been out here longer than me. You know how things work. If you were about to lose everything and had 2 weeks to come up with $800, what would you do? Tom leaned on his pitchfork. I'd pray for a miracle. I'm serious. So am I. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead. $800 is more money than most people out here see in 5 years. There's no legal way to get that kind of cash in 2 weeks unless you've got something valuable to sell. I don't. Then you're out of options. Tom paused. Unless you're willing to do something that's not exactly legal. Caleb looked at him sharply. What do you mean? There's rumors, Tom said carefully, that Wade keeps a safe in his ranch house, cash from his land deals, supposedly. Enough to choke a horse. You're suggesting I rob him? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just telling you what I've heard. Tom went back to shoveling. But if someone was desperate enough, and if they knew Wade was planning to be in Cheyenne for a few days next week for some business meeting, well, a person could make their own choices. Caleb felt his pulse quicken. That's insane. Probably, Tom agreed. But you asked what I'd do. And if it was between losing everything I'd worked for or taking back some of what a thief stole from other people, I know which one I'd choose. Caleb rode home slowly, Tom's words echoing in his head. He couldn't rob Wade. That would make him a criminal, no better than the men who'd rustled his cattle or burned his barn. And if he got caught, he'd lose everything anyway and probably end up in prison. But if he didn't do something, he'd lose everything anyway. When he got back to the ranch, he found Evelyn teaching Noah how to read from an old primer. Clara was outside chopping firewood with more force than necessary. Evelyn looked up when he came in. "Any luck?" "No," Caleb lied. "Nobody knows anything helpful." That night, he barely slept. He kept thinking about Wade's safe, about the money that might be inside, about whether he was capable of becoming the kind of man who would break into someone's house and steal. The answer should have been no. But as he lay there in the dark, listening to Evelyn's steady breathing and the children's soft snores, he wasn't sure anymore. The next few days crawled by. Caleb worked himself half to death trying to avoid thinking about Tom's suggestion, but it was always there in the back of his mind. Then Clara made it worse. She cornered him in the barn on the 5th day after Finch's visit. "I know what you're thinking about," she said. Caleb froze. "What?" "Stealing from Wade. I heard Tom Rawlings talking about it with Mama yesterday when they thought I wasn't listening." "Your mother knows?" "She knows, and she's not saying no." Caleb felt the ground shift under him. "That doesn't mean she's saying yes." "Doesn't mean she's not either." Claire crossed her arms. "I think you should do it." "Clara!" "He stole from us first. He killed our cattle. He burned our barn. He's trying to take our home. Why shouldn't we take something back?" "Because it's wrong." "Says who? The same people who let Wade do whatever he wants because he's got money? The sheriff who won't arrest him even when everyone knows what he's doing?" Clara's voice was fierce. "I don't care about what's right according to people like that. I care about keeping this ranch, about keeping our family together. And if I get caught, then we'll deal with it. But at least you'll have tried." She left, and Caleb stood there feeling like the world had turned upside down. An 11-year-old girl was telling him to commit robbery, and the worst part was, she was making sense. That night he talked to Evelyn. "Clara says you know about Tom's suggestion," he said. Evelyn was washing dishes, her back to him. "I know." And I can't tell you what to do, Caleb. This has to be your choice." "But what do you think?" She turned to face him. "I think Wade Hollister is a thief and a bully who's been stealing from people for years and getting away with it because he can. I think the law won't touch him because he owns the people who are supposed to enforce it. And I think if someone took something back from him, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it." "That's not the same as saying I should do it." "No," Evelyn agreed, "but it's not the same as saying you shouldn't either." Caleb ran his hands through his hair. "If I do this and get caught, they'll hang me or throw me in prison for 20 years. Either way, you and the kids will be on your own." "We're already on our own if you lose this ranch," Evelyn said. "At least this way, there's a chance. A chance of going to prison. Or a chance of saving everything we've been fighting for." She walked over and put her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "I'm not going to tell you to do this," she said quietly, "but I'm not going to tell you not to either. You're a good man, Caleb Mercer, better than you think you are, and whatever you decide, I'll stand by you." The next day, Caleb rode into Coldwater and carefully, casually, asked around about Wade's schedule. Sure enough, Wade was leaving for Cheyenne in 3 days for a week-long business trip. Caleb spent those 3 days preparing. He studied the layout of Wade's ranch from a distance, watching when people came and went, how many men Wade kept on the property, where the house was positioned. He told himself he was just gathering information, that he hadn't actually decided anything yet, but he knew he was lying to himself. On the night Wade left for Cheyenne, Caleb waited until everyone was asleep, then quietly got dressed and grabbed his coat. He was halfway to the door when Evelyn's voice stopped him. "Be careful." He turned and saw her sitting up in bed, her eyes reflecting moonlight from the window. "I will," he said. "And Caleb, come back. No matter what happens, come back. I promise." He rode through the darkness toward Wade's ranch, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to go home, to find another way. But there was no other way. Wade's ranch house sat on a hill, dark except for one lamp in a downstairs window. Caleb tied his horse half a mile away and approached on foot, moving slow and careful through the shadows. He'd expected guards, dogs, something, but the place was quiet. Maybe Wade was so confident in his power that he didn't think he needed protection. Or maybe this was a trap. Caleb pushed the thought away and focused on the house. Tom had said the safe was in Wade's study, a room on the first floor facing east. Getting in was easier than it should have been. A window in the back was unlocked, probably because Wade never imagined anyone would be stupid enough to rob him. Caleb climbed through and found himself in a kitchen. Moonlight filtered through windows, giving him just enough light to see. He moved through the house like a ghost, every creak of the floorboards making his heart stop. The study was exactly where Tom had said it would be, and there, behind a painting of some long-dead ancestor, was the safe. Caleb stared at it, his hands shaking. This was it. The moment where he either became a thief or walked away. He thought about Evelyn and Clara and Noah. He thought about the ranch, the cabin, the life they were trying to build. And he thought about Wade, sitting in some fancy hotel in Cheyenne, probably already planning how he'd auction off Caleb's land and add it to his empire. Caleb pulled out the crowbar he'd brought and positioned it against the safe's door. Then he heard footsteps. Someone was coming down the stairs. Caleb's blood turned to ice. He ducked behind the desk just as the study door opened and lamplight flooded the room. "I know you're in here, Mercer," Wade's voice. Caleb's mind raced. Wade was supposed to be in Cheyenne, unless he'd never left, unless someone had warned him. "You might as well come out," Wade continued. "I've got 3 men outside with rifles. You're not leaving here unless I let you." Caleb stood up slowly, his hands empty, his heart sinking. Wade was standing in the doorway holding a pistol, a satisfied smile on his face. "Figured you'd try something stupid," Wade said. "Tom Rawlings has a big mouth when he's drunk. He told one of my men all about your little conversation. I canceled my trip just so I could catch you in the act. I wasn't going to—" "Don't," Wade interrupted. "You were absolutely going to rob me. And now I've got you for breaking and entering, attempted theft, probably a dozen other charges. Sheriff Bridger's going to love this." Caleb felt sick. He'd failed. Worse, he'd walked right into Wade's trap like an idiot. "Here's what's going to happen," Wade said. "You're going to sign over your land to me right now. In exchange, I won't press charges. You and your little family can walk away with your lives and whatever you can carry. That's more than you deserve. And if I refuse, then you go to prison and I take the land anyway. Your wife and kids end up on the street with nothing." Wade's smile widened. "Your choice." Caleb stood there, trapped, seeing his whole world collapse around him. Then from somewhere outside he heard shouting and gunfire. Wade's head snapped toward the window. The gunfire outside got louder, closer, and Caleb heard men shouting in confusion. "What the hell?" Wade started, but he never finished. The study door burst open, and Tom Rawlings stood there with a rifle pointed at Wade's chest. "Drop the pistol, Wade." Wade's face went purple with rage. "Rawlings? You're part of this?" "Drop it," Tom repeated. Wade let the pistol fall to the floor, and Caleb grabbed it before he could change his mind. "What's happening out there?" Caleb asked. "Your wife happened," Tom said, not taking his eyes off Wade. "When you left tonight, she rode to every ranch in the county, told everyone what you were planning to do and why. Said if Wade caught you, he'd use it to take everything from all of us eventually. Half the county's outside right now, making sure Wade's men don't interfere." Caleb felt his legs go weak. "Evelyn did that? She's a hell of a woman, Mercer. Now let's finish this before Wade's hired guns figure out they're outnumbered." Martha Chen appeared in the doorway behind Tom, along with 3 other ranchers Caleb recognized. They looked grim and ready for a fight. "Safe's behind the painting," Tom said to them. "Get it open." 2 of the men went to work on the safe while Tom kept his rifle trained on Wade. Caleb stood there feeling like he was in a dream, unable to process what was happening. "You're all making a mistake," Wade said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Breaking into my home, threatening me with weapons. That's a hanging offense." "So is fraud," Martha Chen said, "and theft, and arson, and about a dozen other things you've been doing for years. You can't prove any of that." "Maybe not," Tom said, "but we don't need to. We just need what's in that safe." The men working on the safe finally got it open with a crowbar and a lot of force. Inside were stacks of cash, land deeds, and papers documenting transactions that made Caleb's stomach turn. "This is everything," one of the men said, pulling out the papers. "Proof of every crooked deal Wade's made in the past 5 years. Notes he bought from the bank for pennies, Land he stole, people he forced out. That's my property, Wade shouted. You can't just take it. Watch us, Tom said. They gathered everything from the safe, the money, the papers, all of it, and loaded it into sacks they'd brought. Wade stood there shaking with rage, his face twisted into something ugly. I'll have all of you arrested, he said. Every single one of you. You'll rot in prison for this. No, a new voice said from the doorway. They won't. Everyone turned to see Sheriff Bridger standing there, his badge glinting in the lamplight. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood Doc Harrison, Harlan Boone, and a dozen townspeople Caleb recognized. Wade's expression shifted from rage to confusion. Tom, what are they doing here? Arrest these people. Bridger didn't move. Can't do that, Wade. What do you mean you can't? They broke into my house. They're stealing from me. Funny thing happened tonight, Bridger said slowly. A whole lot of people came to my office, told me some very interesting stories about your business dealings, about how you've been buying up notes from the bank, forcing people off their land, burning barns, killing cattle. That's slander. Maybe, Bridger said, but then Doc Harrison here remembered something. He treated a man 3 months ago who'd been beaten half to death by some of your hired hands. Man was too scared to press charges, but Doc kept records. And Boone remembered selling you kerosene the same night Mercer's barn burned down. Thought it was odd at the time, you buying that much fuel in winter. Wade's face had gone pale. You can't prove anything. Maybe not in court, Bridger admitted, but I don't need to. Because every person in this county now knows what you've been doing, and they're done being scared of you. You're supposed to work for me, Wade said, his voice cracking. I pay you. You used to pay me, Bridger corrected, but I just got a better offer. Folks took up a collection tonight, enough to cover my salary for the next year without your help. Turns out when people work together, they can do a lot more than one rich bastard ever could. Wade looked around the room at all the faces staring back at him. For the first time since Caleb had known him, Wade Hollister looked small. What do you want? Wade asked quietly. We want our land back, Martha Chen said. Every note you stole, every deed you forced out of people. You're going to return it all. And if I refuse? Then we tell the territorial governor about your arrangement with the bank, Bridger said. I'm sure he'd be very interested to hear about fraud on this scale. You might buy your way out of local charges, but territorial prison is a different story. Wade stood there for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing glass. Fine, he finally said. Take it. Take all of it. But this isn't over. Yeah, it is, Caleb said. He stepped forward and looked Wade in the eye. You're done pushing people around. You're done stealing. And if you ever come near my family again, territorial governor or not, I'll finish what we started here tonight. Wade said nothing. He just stood there, defeated, while the ranchers carried out the contents of his safe. Outside, the scene was chaos. At least 30 families had gathered, surrounding Wade's hired men, who'd been disarmed and looked thoroughly confused about what to do. When they saw Wade being led out of the house, deflated and beaten, some of them actually laughed. Evelyn was there in the crowd, standing next to Clara and Noah. When she saw Caleb, relief flooded her face, and she ran to him. You're all right, she said, grabbing his arms. I was so scared. I'm fine, Caleb said. Thanks to you. Tom said you organized all this? I couldn't let you do it alone, Evelyn said. I couldn't let you become something you're not just to save us. You saved me instead. We saved each other, she said. Clara and Noah came over, and Clara was grinning wider than Caleb had ever seen. We're not going to lose the ranch now, right? Noah asked. Caleb looked at Tom, who was holding the sacks of money and papers from Wade's safe. We need to count everything, Tom said. But from what I saw in there, Wade had enough cash to cover your debt twice over, plus notes on at least 20 other properties. We'll make sure everyone gets what's owed to them. And the rest? Caleb asked. Goes into a fund, Martha Chen said, to help people rebuild what Wade destroyed, starting with your barn. Caleb felt something break loose in his chest, something that had been wound tight for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. I don't know what to say, he managed. Don't say anything, Tom said. Just help us figure out how to make sure this never happens again. Over the next 2 weeks, the county transformed. The money from Wade's safe was divided up according to who'd been wronged and how badly. Caleb's debt was paid in full, with enough left over to buy lumber for a new barn and replace the cattle he'd lost. Other families got their land back, their stolen property returned, their debts cleared. Wade Hollister left Wyoming 3 days after the confrontation. Rumor was he'd gone to California, or maybe Colorado, somewhere he could start over where people didn't know what he'd done. Caleb didn't care where he went, as long as it was far away. The bank president resigned under pressure from the territorial governor, who launched an investigation into the scheme. Turned out Wade had been running similar operations in 3 other counties. The new bank president was a woman from Denver who made it clear that predatory lending wouldn't be tolerated anymore. Sheriff Bridger kept his job, but everyone knew he was on a short leash. He'd have to earn back trust he'd thrown away when he took Wade's money. And Caleb's ranch started to feel like a real home. The new barn went up in 6 days with help from every family in the county. It was bigger than the old one, sturdier, built with hands that had fought together and won together. When they raised the final beam, people cheered, and someone broke out a fiddle. And before Caleb knew what was happening, there was dancing in his yard. He stood watching it all, feeling overwhelmed and grateful and scared of how much it meant to him. Evelyn found him there, away from the crowd. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different everything is from when you first showed up here. About how I thought I knew what I needed, and I was wrong about all of it." Evelyn smiled. "What did you think you needed?" "To be left alone," Caleb said. "To not depend on anyone. To keep the world at arm's length, so it couldn't hurt me." "And now? Now I can't imagine going back to that," he admitted. "Now I look at all these people, and I realize that being alone wasn't strength. It was just fear dressed up as something else." Evelyn took his hand. "You're not alone anymore." "No," Caleb agreed. "I'm not." They stood there watching the celebration, watching Clara dance with some of the town girls who used to mock her, watching Noah laugh as other boys chased him around the yard, watching people who'd once been strangers become something like family. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Caleb and Evelyn sat outside on the step, looking up at the stars. "I need to tell you something," Evelyn said. "All right. When I answered your advertisement, I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't even looking for a home, not really. I was just running away from shame and failure, trying to find anywhere that wasn't where I'd been." "I know," Caleb said. "But somewhere along the way, it changed," Evelyn continued. "This place changed. You changed. Or maybe I changed. I don't know. All I know is that I'm not running anymore. This is where I want to be, with you, with the children, on this ranch that we almost lost and fought to keep." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you stayed when you could have left." "I'm glad you let us in," Evelyn said. "Even when you were scared, even when it would have been easier to stay closed off." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the barn, wind rustling through grass. "Do you think Wade will come back?" Evelyn asked eventually. "Maybe," Caleb said. "But if he does, he'll find something different than what he left. He'll find people who aren't afraid anymore, people who know what they're capable of when they stand together." "And what are we capable of?" Caleb thought about everything they'd been through, the winter storms, the dead cattle, the fires and threats, the desperate plan that almost ended in disaster, the community that rose up when it mattered most. "More than we knew," he said, "more than I ever gave us credit for." Spring came early that year, or maybe it just felt that way because everything else had changed so much. The snow melted, revealing grass that had survived the brutal winter. Caleb's herd grew with successful calving, and he bought more cattle with money he'd saved from not having to pay Wade's inflated prices for feed and supplies. The new barn stood solid and strong, a reminder of what could be built when people worked together. Clara started school again, but this time the other children didn't mock her. They'd seen her mother ride through the night to save a man who wasn't even her blood father. They'd heard about how the Mercer family had stood up to Wade Hollister when no one else would. Clara was no longer the mail-order kid. She was someone who mattered. Noah gained weight and color, turning from a pale ghost of a boy into someone who laughed and ran and asked endless questions about everything. He spent hours in the barn with the horses, especially Willow, talking to them like they could understand every word. Maybe they could. And Evelyn transformed the cabin into something that felt permanent. She planted a garden in the yard. She sewed curtains that actually matched. She organized Caleb's tools so he could find them, cooked meals that didn't taste like desperation, and filled the space with small touches that said, "This is a home, not just a place to survive." One evening in late April, Caleb came in from the fields to find Evelyn setting the table for dinner. Clara was helping her, and Noah was trying to sneak a piece of bread when he thought no one was looking. It was such an ordinary moment, nothing special about it, and that's what made it perfect. "Dinner's almost ready," Evelyn said. "Wash up." Caleb washed his hands and face at the basin, then sat down at the table with his family. They ate together, talking about their days, what cattle had been born, what Clara had learned at school, whether Noah had convinced the chickens to lay more eggs by singing to them. After dinner, Caleb went outside to do a final check on the animals. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossible, too beautiful to be real. Noah followed him out. "Can I help?" the boy asked. "Sure," Caleb said. "You can count the cattle, make sure they're all there." Noah's face lit up, and he ran ahead to the pasture, his small voice drifting back as he counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Caleb watched him, feeling something swell in his chest that he didn't have words for. When he'd first come to Wyoming 12 years ago, he'd been running from the war, from memories of men dying, from a world that made no sense. He thought isolation would protect him, that needing nothing and no one would keep him safe. He'd been wrong. Real safety didn't come from walls or distance or refusing to let people in. It came from connection, from allowing yourself to care about something more than just survival, from building something with people who had your back when things got hard. It came from family, not the family you were born with necessarily, but the family you chose, the family you fought for, the family you built in a small cabin on a dying ranch in the middle of nowhere, with a woman who refused to give up, and children who deserved better than what the world had given them. "I counted 28, Noah called back. "Is that right?" "That's right," Caleb said. "Good job." Noah beamed and ran back to the cabin to tell his mother. Caleb stood there a while longer, watching the last light fade from the sky, feeling the cold wind on his face, but not minding it anymore. A year ago, he'd been alone, failing, drowning slowly in debt and silence. Now he had a family, a community, a reason to wake up that wasn't just duty or stubbornness, but something that felt like purpose. The ranch still wasn't easy. There would be more hard winters, more cattle lost, more struggles to keep food on the table and money in the bank. That was the nature of this life. And Caleb wasn't naive enough to think one victory over Wade Hollister meant everything would be smooth from now on. But now he wouldn't face those struggles alone. He went back inside and found Evelyn cleaning up from dinner while Clara helped, and Noah drew pictures on a piece of paper with a stub of pencil. "Everything all right out there?" Evelyn asked. "Everything's fine," Caleb said. She smiled, and he realized she wasn't just asking about the cattle. That night, lying in the darkness listening to his family sleep around him, Caleb thought about the advertisement he'd placed in the Boston newspaper all those months ago. He'd been looking for someone to cook and clean, someone to make the loneliness more bearable, someone to help him survive. He'd gotten so much more than that. He'd gotten a partner who was stronger than him in ways that mattered. He'd gotten children who challenged him and made him better. He'd gotten a reason to fight for something bigger than himself. He'd gotten a life worth living. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the money or the land or the cattle, not defeating Wade or paying off the debt or building a new barn. What mattered was the people sleeping in this cabin, the community that had stood beside them, the knowledge that when everything fell apart, they'd found a way to put it back together. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but together. The next morning, Caleb woke before dawn like always. But instead of lying there dreading the day ahead, he got up feeling something that might have been contentment. He made coffee, started the fire, and watched the sun come up over the Wyoming plains that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. Evelyn emerged from the bedroom, her hair loose around her shoulders, and came to stand beside him at the window. "Beautiful morning," she said. "Yeah," Caleb agreed. "It is." She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders, and they stood there watching the light spread across their land. Behind them, Clara and Noah started to stir, their voices soft and sleepy. And Caleb Mercer, the lonely rancher who'd thought he'd die alone on this failing piece of ground, realized he'd found something he never knew he was looking for. He'd found belonging, not through blood or birthright, but through choice and struggle and the stubborn refusal to give up on people who'd refused to give up on him. The ranch would survive. They'd make it through winter and drought and whatever else came their way. Because they weren't doing it alone anymore. And that made all the difference.
See, he's got it. He's got it. He's got it.
That was some bullshit, man.
What the fuck?
I didn't even hear it.
All right, vote to leave. Should we vote to leave? Wait, no. Wait, let's see if he notices. If he notices, then we'll vote to leave, or we won't.
You didn't check it.
Vote to leave. Vote to leave. Get out. Please don't try it. Don't try it. Don't try it. Just keep it in your hand, please, God.
Okay, he's realizing.
Okay. I think he's realized we're all dead.
Please say he understands to stay in the ship. Please.
Please, just stay in the ship. If you can hear me. Oh my God! Thank God.
Okay.
Thank God. Don't drop the fucking egg, please.
Wait, he's going. I thought he was going to deep islands.
Please don't. Please don't.
Okay, I think he's good. Yeah, he's good.
Oh my God, man. That sucked.
Some bullshit, man.
That's some fucking horse shit.
Chandler, I don't know how you could die.
You forgot it was you.
I was
We
falling right
also
behind
jumped
you.
in there.
Yeah, we did the exact same thing happened to us.
Y'all blew up.
Yes.
Yes, we were
I
like
thought it
huddled
was weird that
together.
y'all were standing on top of each other, and then y'all did like the vote thing. I was like, yeah, I'm getting the fuck out.
Thank God.
We were like close together, and I walked through some like literally 2 inches into the steam and just fucking.
We made like
You did
not
exactly
much
what
money at
happened to
all.
me and you, Chandler, except they both died. I really don't know how you didn't die.
Me fucking neither.
I was following right behind you. At least what I thought was right behind you, and then. Oh wait, isn't there a car now?
There's been a car for a long time.
I haven't played since.
Is that
they
enough
added, like,
money?
The map.
The quota's 190, right? Wait, let's see. It's 130. Wait, this might be doable.
I think it's enough.
Let's see.
I think it's like 160.
Please be.